You're tuned in to the MtG Cabal Cast, where they cover Magic, the Gathering Finance. All right? You don't know about it? You're tuned in right now and get ready to learn some shit. Buckle your seatbelts and light a blunt and get ready for the MtG Cabal Cast, starring Reptar and Thirsty, them onion head motherfuckers.
Alrighty, guys, welcome to the newest episode of the Cabal Cast. This is going to be kind of a unique episode. It is something we've done once before-ish. We're basically checking in. How do we individually feel about the industry? Do we have an exit plan? What's our plan for how stuff has changed? Because let's be real, this industry's changed a lot in the last 2 to 3 years between, COVID, events going away, events coming back. How events are even happening has changed drastically between who's organizing them, if it's local, global, whatever, and then Wizards doing what Wizards is doing with Amazon and just like dumping all over the LGS. And basically we're just doing a check-in of what do we see, where we're at in the industry now, and where do we see ourselves in the future. Yeah. So that's it.
Yep. The interesting part is like some of this is going to sync up pretty well between a vendor and an LGS perspective because there's a ton of overlap as we discussed in the podcast. And one of the interesting side of things is like there's still a retail side to both being a vendor and being an LGS. For me as a vendor, though, the retail side that would be equivalent to what you're doing is like, okay, the website and if we have an in-store presence. So I worked for Troll, it's no secret. We had an LGS. Star City has an LGS. Channel had an LGS. And it really doesn't do a whole lot. You're not getting like extra distro or anything from that. It's just a place where your employees can go to play, etc. And it's not quite like the minor currency where it's just like, oh, we're going to pay in fun money and you can go spend it here only. It's like, no. Yeah. Your employees are gamers, so let's set up a neat place for them. And from a large vendor side of things, as somebody who worked on the back end, it doesn't really change. That feeling doesn't change. I still go in, still do my work. My feelings about the work that I do in regards to how I think it's going to benefit the organization changes, but that's going to be the same no matter where I work as somebody who's working on the back end. But if I'm in the warehouse or I'm a product specialist right now, I'm probably tearing my hair out because it's just variations on variations across all the games. And while this might be normal for Pokemon or Yu-Gi-Oh!, it just seems like there's shit coming down the pipe in every one of these categories, even across the miniatures. It's just super variation. It's just super annoying. The industry seems to be kind of trucking some of the players for a lot of what's going on too, and that kind of stymies my feelings for where I'm working if the games that I enjoy are no longer bringing me enjoyment because I have to see them all the time.
Yep.
But for the work that I do in particular, I don't really feel that a lot, and I think that's wildly different than your experience.
Yeah, I think one of the most interesting things here is, when you talk about a product specialist, and this is something that you kind of feel at the LGS as well, is, we had, Ben did the math, it was like 900 variations in Commander Legends 2. So in addition to just being an absolute garbage set, now I have to keep track of that. Well, the interesting thing about variations now is, all right, well, as an LGS perspective on this retail side, it is so much harder for me to track what my players want, have what my players want, and keep them happy because there's so much more that they could possibly want, and my players might want 10 different things.
Yeah.
And it makes it a little bit difficult because, in addition to that, you've also got fulfillment by Amazon. I've said it a few times on the podcast, when the Crimson Vow delays hit, they sent an email out to the LGSs and they were like, hey guys, sorry, your pre-release stuff got, a little out of whack because, frankly, well, we just don't have supply. But don't worry, they can still get it on Amazon. Yeah. And it makes it very difficult. And then also, guess who gets pre-releases for Double Masters? Only premium stores. That's it. And as a store that applied for premium, and between the application window And when they came out and did the walkthrough, the conditions for premium changed.
Ugh.
That feels really bad.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like a moving target where it's just further and further and further and further.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're a store that's already operating on razor thin margins and you've got to spend even more on your initial investment to get premium, that does make it kind of difficult for you to be able to comfortably justify, like, hey, you know what? I'm cool spending this money on this.
Yeah.
Because that target's moving. It just doesn't count anymore. And that's kind of an issue. Now, that said, we've kind of seen a shift now with LGSs, at least local to me, where things are getting more, not necessarily cohesive, but stores are talking to one another more.
Okay.
They're engaging more and basically saying, hey, not collaborating, but getting feedback. What are you doing for this event? What kind of turnout are you having? What events can we run when to make things easier so that we're not competing as much? And, it kind of sucks that it basically took the death of the LGS and Wizards' eyes for this to happen, but it has made things a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
And that, kind of dovetails nicely into the next thing we wanted to talk about, which was the community. And that's, as an LGS, and even for me on the larger vendor scale, the community and the people that I see regularly, the people that I engage with, like my regulars, the store's regulars, they've seemed much more grateful lately.
Okay.
And I don't know if that's because, and for some of them it is, like, they see on Amazon, oh, well, like, what are you supposed to do? Wizards is literally just dumpstering you on this stuff.
Yeah.
Like, they just have better margins, so, we'll spend a little bit extra. We're okay getting a little bit less for our cards now because, you know what? You got rent to pay. Mm-hmm. You give us a spot to play. You let us hang out. We get to EDH every night we want to. You have snacks, you have drinks, you have whatever. And that's made it a lot easier, I feel like, for us.
Yeah, the ecosystem up here is, I think, becoming very similar, where stores are working harder to not step on each other's toes in terms of event type and timing. Yeah. And the players seem to be more apt to want to frequent more stores in a given area to search for the product they're looking for than they were previously. They still hold tight to their ideals about which store is their home LGS, despite the lack of distance between them. And that does determine who goes where for F&M. But we're seeing still through EDH, which is one of the formats that an LGS holds for F&M up here, and another holds on Sunday, players float through both of those oftentimes. The split really just comes down to more so pre-releases, who's going where for those. The store that holds constructed events basically has captured those because there's no other store doing that right now. So the derivation comes solely from pre-releases, and that's not something that we saw before. We saw people just kind of blindly sticking to their store for anything that wasn't an IQ or a GPT or an event that led to something larger. They never wanted to really frequent anybody else for whatever reason, and so that opening of the community has been really nice because it allows people to just kind of see, like, oh, there's more than just the one store. I know there's pros and cons to everything, and I don't always have to stay at my store. I can help another store when needed, or I can feel better about playing events here because I've actually been there instead of just creating these preconceived notions or from what they've heard from somebody else experiencing, etc., like the word of mouth rumors. And it's just nice to see that kind of growth. What we're lacking right now is the travel community. A blanket statement would be that New Englanders travel a lot to go to Magic events in other states because there are events worthwhile in those states. But in all honesty, that hasn't been true since the removal of the PPTQ system. So right now we are missing a lot of that travel. Some stores tried to spackle the gaps with their own event series, and it was great for one store in New Hampshire, the store owner that everybody knows from the miniatures section, that side of things, So a lot of people would go down to play in that tournament series. But without any other larger reason, we're actually missing out seeing judges and players from Maine and judges and players from New Hampshire. And it's not like somebody like Tom Shea can come in and just say, hey, I'm going to run a big old event down here in Mass or in Rhode Island, and we'll see all those people. That's not necessarily the case anymore. There are grinders that just stopped grinding that we won't see anymore. Like, after Goifgate, Pascal Maynard started coming down here a lot more often because he and John Stern and some of their friends were grinding to get back on the tour. We saw them all the time. And that part of the community is gone, and I don't think it's ever coming back. And to me, that's a little saddening because I won't see a lot of those people at the events I travel to if I judge anymore. But I do like to see more so the growth of the local community. That's meant more to me as a vendor and a judge, and it's not something I really thought about ahead of all like the lockdowns that we saw.
Do you think that's something that if we get like Waterbury, the vintage event, if we get that back, that'll change, or do you think that's just like, nah, there's no saving it at this point, it's just gone?
The Waterbury Open is interesting because there are a handful of people in Vermont that I know could actually play in that event, but they don't play vintage. So that's kind of, there's that. But that we definitely would get people in the surrounding states that play. So you would kind of get that cadre of people to come out, definitely. And there were a couple others like that. There's a convention called Carnage that takes place now on the Killington Resort property, I believe over the summer. I don't know if it's coming back, but that used to hold decent Magic events. Like there was a Legacy event there for our Revised Pack once a year or two before. It was Legacy for a Sapphire. Like,
okay,
yeah, these events paid out, and we would definitely get to see a lot of people that way. I think to really see a lot of the grinders that we used to see traveling around come back, we would need those PTQs to really like hit home, the ones that we're going to be seeing coming up shortly. So the sense of community might grow and it might return to what it used to be, it might return to form up here, but I don't really foresee that. To step back a moment to talk about the retail side of things, Vermont and New Hampshire, as far as I know, are two states without a WPN premium store.
Yeah, Missouri also does. Well, sorry, Missouri has a WPM premium, but it's in Springfield.
Yeah, these are just, I believe, two states that don't have them. For a while, the closest was Face in Montreal. There might be a closer one now in Albany, New York, which is 2.5 hours away. So, like, the community up here is also kind of lost in that regard, too. When the local LGS that I went to had the title stripped when WotC did their changeover a couple of years ago, and they just can't get it back because there are things like no cardboard, and it's like, cool, this is an LGS that's upstairs in a bar from the Prohibition era that just doesn't have the space to accommodate your ridiculous rules. They also were one of the largest miniatures inventories on the eastern seaboard for a while. Like, they just don't have the space or the desire to meet some of this stuff, too.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, too, the thing is, at that point, you know, does it really make or break the business?
For them, no.
Yeah, exactly.
What was making or breaking it was singles. Like, the amount of time they spent on it for as little as they made. Like, that was honestly, it seemed like making or breaking. And what's made it for them recently has been moving into Gunpla. Just serving up, you know, $20 to $100 models. Like, that's done more for them as an LGS to make margins than Magic singles or being WPN premium. I mean, sometimes there's a little bit of lament that they won't get a promo with their name on it, but nobody else will, so who cares?
No. You don't have a leg up because everyone's there.
Exactly. And we kind of started to talk about this a little bit. So there's, you know, the community in the store and what goes on, and a lot of what I was bemoaning was also at events, you know, traveling. One of the things that we didn't talk about is vendors, the community within vendors, the people you see. And for me, that was a lot different than you, because I was traveling maybe once a quarter, unless I was contracted out like I was around MH1 release. One by Face, where I basically did like one a month. And so for me, I haven't seen any of my friends since like Minnesota, Vegas, Detroit, maybe it was Minnesota. Minnesota might have been, or Vegas was like the last one where I saw like any of my vendor friends. And I got hit up for Syracuse, but I'm busy that weekend. And like this in within the industry, that community is also super helpful, super inclusive, super friendly. And without traveling, people aren't able to see the people they know, the friends they know, and
Yeah.
like that is, even if I were to step back from vending in its entirety, one of the things I would still attempt to make the time for is finding large events where I could go and see a lot of these people, because that community means just so much to me.
Yeah, for sure. And that's been, and I'll touch on this with a later point, if as I've considered, whether or not I want to be in the industry anymore, one of the things that's held me here has been the vendor community, because it is one of those things where, like, look, we may not see each other very often, and for 2 years we didn't see each other at all, but we're still communicating literally every day. Like, there are vendors that know more about what's going on in my life than literally anyone except my wife. Because that's just how close it is. And seeing those people is one of the most important things about the industry to me. And it's not like, we're sitting there talking about dumping on some kid that sold us a bunch of stuff. It's literally just like, I don't want to say like scars from battle together type thing, but you have this bond of like, man, we've been at these 16-hour days on 2 hours sleep, showing up just like an absolute zombie. And one of us just brings donuts for people, and it's like the best thing in the world.
Yeah.
And that's, one of those things that at the larger level has kind of kept me in it for as long as I have. And there's, plenty of them that we've made time to see each other. I'll be going to some sports cards events with some of them, including the National, and I got a booth at the Dallas Sports Card Show with one. And it's just finding ways to do that. Because like you said, even if I remove myself from it completely, I'm still going to, like, these people will still be a part of my life.
Yeah.
I'll still be a part of their life. That's just how it's going to be. And that's one thing that I think has actually gotten stronger over the last couple of years, is that tightness with the vendor community. We just check in on each other way more, because when we weren't seeing each other once a month, twice a month, depending on how much we were traveling, all of a sudden it was like, man, like, I'm not seeing this person. I really I miss them.
Yeah.
They were a lot of fun to hang out with. Let me check in on them and see how they're doing.
Yeah.
And that's something that, I don't think can be replaced anywhere in the industry.
Being a vendor can be grueling, but at the same time, it's also like a subsidized trip to go hang out with your friends, eat well for a weekend.
Exactly.
And that is one of the things I don't think I'll ever sour on when it comes to this industry. But that means I would still have to go to events.
Yeah.
And I'm probably done playing in them, because that's just whatever. Like, I can't do competitive anymore. There's no reason to grind. I'm old and I have a profession. I don't have time.
Yeah, right.
Just don't have the time for the reps, but I'll throw it out when I can. So working those out of store events, those large events, it just becomes the grind again. And if that's what I have to do to go see my friends at like a decent return, then so be it. Otherwise, I just sell stuff, and like a lot of other people, subsidize that way. And I don't know. I mean, I'll probably miss working the events in time if they build back to what they were. And I think that basically, to me, means like they've got to have something like a Vegas or a SeaTac once or twice a year. If they can't get to that level again, then I won't miss working those events. If they do, then I will. And to me, that's kind of the hard divide. Anything that isn't those events, I'll miss.
Anything that isn't those events, don't get me wrong, it's been fun being back. It still doesn't feel the same.
It doesn't. It's weird. There's like a lot of alternatives, and they all just kind of feel like old GPs or GPTs or PTQs when those mattered, when people would actually come out at 7 a.m. on a Saturday to grind a buy at a Grand Prix trial. Like that. If you're not past that, it's not going to really upset me to not be there anymore.
Yeah.
I don't know how I feel about conventions, though. That one's still kind of a mystery to me. I'm seeing some stuff go by for Anime Expo because that's traditionally on July 4th weekend, which is upcoming. By the time the show releases, it will have passed. And this is the second year it's been back. And I have no standing invite to either last year or this year. And I think my Anime Boston run is done as well. And I think I miss working at an event like Anime Expo, but not Anime Boston. But
interesting.
That's because of the spectacle of Anime Expo.
That's fair.
While it doesn't feel like San Diego Comic-Con, I can understand if somebody who's worked both says they were similar. But San Diego Comic-Con, New York Comic-Con definitely seem like events that I do not want to be working because it's just... what was the movie title? Everything
Everywhere all at once.
Yeah, that's... Yeah.
It's... most people I know at this point that work NYCC or SDCC, the way that all of them have worked it out with their employer is I will work for 2 days for free and get a badge.
Okay.
And what a lot of companies have done is they just patchwork their weekend staff that way because it is so much to deal with throughout the weekend that it's just like the only way you'll get people is like, yeah, you know what, we'll pay you to hang out basically for 3 days.
Yeah, that I've heard DragonCon is more about the spectacle than it is the work.
Significantly.
And so, not having gone or worked, I would like to at least once. But I don't think I have a desire anymore to work Gen Con.
Oh, yeah, no.
I think I've never, again, haven't gone, but I would like to go. Haven't worked, would not like to. And
no, I've worked it a few times, and at this point, like, it's just, I don't know, it's fine, but and similar to a con, you do only have hours from 10 to 6.
Yes,
it's like you get off early and you can do stuff, but man, those 8 hours feel like a 14 because it is constant, nonstop. Even when you don't have someone sitting in front of you at a buy table, there is so much stuff going on. You're required to be on because there's so many people there that you have to interact with that it's just like, man, I am done with this. I am over it.
Yeah.
Can we move on, please?
Yeah. What made me want to see what it was like was the stories I was hearing from Troll, because they were close enough to actually run 18-wheel trucks from the expo hall back to the warehouse in Kentucky constantly so they could continue to move inventory back and forth. And they did that booth might have closed down after 6 and reopened at 10, but it was actually in operation for 24 hours because there was constant churn behind the scenes. And the only reason I wanted to work Gen Con was just to see that spectacle of a booth with a brand that is so strong at like Gen Con and Origins and the other one that's in the Southwest, Gamma. The Troll brand was so powerful for so long at those that I just wanted to see what it was like. But now I just have no desire because it seems like everyone, like you said, is just swamped all the time. The year that TCG Player brought their ion scanners the first time, like I heard that was the worst thing in the world.
Yeah.
When Beckett was grading on Prem, I heard that was again the worst line in the world. The best thing that I've heard come from Gen Con is, this is circa the mid-2000s, the Fuck It Bucket, which is just a bucket of liquor.
Yep.
One of my friends tripped and cracked a tooth because of the Fuck It Bucket.
Yeah, the Fuck It Bucket was great.
Yeah. So, would I miss out of store events? Not going to them to see people? Absolutely. To work? Probably not, unless it was a Vegas or a SeaTac. That I'll always miss. Now, taking a look at it differently, setting aside coronavirus, how long would you continue to travel for events, do you think?
So this was something I said I'd touch on earlier.
Yep.
One of the hardest things for me, and this is something I've been struggling with a lot over the past few months, is just, man, I like 10 people in the industry. and they're really the only ones I care about. I don't like 16-hour days, driving to events, flying to events, dealing with flight stuff.
Yeah.
For example, so SCG Richmond, I was supposed to arrive at 11 p.m. Thursday by plane.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, because American Airlines canceled 500 flights that day, I arrived by car at 6:30 a.m. to a 7 a.m. call time. So I was up from 11 a.m. Thursday until 11 p.m. Friday, working the event after driving for 16 hours.
Yeah.
And the more and more that stuff happens, the more and more I'm just like, man, I am like really over the industry.
Yeah.
Like, do I really want to keep doing this? Like, sure, it's easy, but it's also a lot. And like, I could just take the time off and sit at home with wife, daughter, the cats, whatever, and that would be so much easier.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, a conversation I've been having with myself is, how long do I really see myself doing this? And honestly, probably not for a couple more, more than 2 or 3 more years that I'd want to do it, especially the way the industry's going, the way Wizards is handling things, or should I say Hasbro? I don't know who's running the show at this point. I know who they say is running the show, but I don't know if that's actually who it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just, I'd almost rather, like, don't get me wrong, I love sitting down at a booth and sitting across from someone and buying cards for 12 hours. I legitimately love that. That's fun. It's easy. And it cruises by. It's everything else about it that I'm just like, yeah, I don't want to deal with this.
Yeah, yeah.
So like maybe a couple years.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons why I liked it so much, and I knew about it for a while, but it also kind of speaks to the way Face and Galactus do things and why sometimes their booths just seem more energetic. Is they don't grind every weekend or every event. They are very picky about which events they go to, which means there's more lead time between, which gives them more time to travel and experience the niceties of flight within the continental United States with less regularity. Like, I travel well, I know that, but if I had to grind every weekend or every other weekend, I probably would have just lost my mind.
Oh yeah.
A long time ago. So even at the once a quarter schedule, I think for me, I like setting aside coronavirus, I could probably keep doing this for as long as my friends do it. And once the majority of them fall away, I'd probably stop traveling to events. Not like I don't want to make new friends again, but it's not a big deal.
It's hard.
But yeah,
like I've got friends I've been friends with for 10 years through this. No offense to the new guys coming in. I like them more.
Yeah, it's just like, these are my friends. This is what we did. We're all getting old together. There's a No Effects song, Mattersville, about the retired punk rocker community. Like, that's what it is. That's all it is.
I mean, that's what it is. And that's like, I would still go to events after I'm done working them.
Yeah.
At least at the regularity I am now, which granted, so after Richmond was immediately Origins, I now took the month of July off before I have like one or two, or the month of June off before I have like 1 or 2 shows a month over the next couple of months.
Okay.
I would still go and hang out and subsidize it in other ways, either through like, hey, I've got a collection I bought that I know you're paying a good buy list on, I'm going to bring it to you, or something like that, but I don't know that I would be behind a booth for more than a few more years at this rate.
So your cadence and your purpose would change over time, and I feel like that's just kind of the way it goes. The more you work events, the more you got used to seeing some people, show leads, etc. A couple of years in, you realize that eventually they backed out. Is it Alex Ullman, the CFB?
Yeah.
Right? It was like year 2 of, this is probably a year 2 at the most before CFB is given the dedicated Magic Fest run.
Yeah.
But to basically show that they could handle it and make every show, CFB is going to every Grand Prix in North America. That includes Canada. And we go to Canada. So I'm working a booth in Toronto. And Alex Allman is there. And we go to dinner on Sunday night, and everybody's there. Like, we're waiting for the channel guys to show up. And somebody was like, how many has he been to? How has he not had a heart attack? How is he going to make it through this? And I think Alex, to just save himself his own sanity at that event, just started buying stuff. I think he bought a bust of Galactus at that event. That was like over 12 inches tall and had no idea immediately how he was going to get it back home. And it's not like he was traveling from event to event either. He was being routed like a package for these. And eventually Alex just stepped off. I don't think I've seen Alex since Channel Fireball got exclusivity. I don't know if Alex did another event again after that, but it was like a 2-year run. Every Grand Prix in North America, Alex was at one, and I wouldn't be surprised if Alex did just burn out. Or he was like, I'll keep working for you, but I can't do every event. You guys got to put me in the warehouse or something. Like, get me off this.
Warehouse, behind the scenes, logistics, whatever. I just can't be on like this all of the time.
Now, that's events. Up top, we talked a little bit about the retail side of things. So, you might time out in 2 years as a vendor at events, but what about working at or for an LGS?
I'm of two minds about this, right? I love the local community. One of the things I do when I work shows for other companies is I'm like, all right, here's my normal show rate if you pay me cash. Mm-hmm. I'd like this show rate, and I'll get cards instead. This is my store credit rate. And one of the reasons is legitimately, I just get cards to bring back and sell to people locally. And I don't necessarily even need to get a discount on this stuff. It's literally just, I'm going to bring these back. I'll sell them at a discount to my locals. Doesn't matter. On the other hand, if I get asked one more time by someone who walks into the store and says, hey, I really like ramping and drawing cards. Build me an EDH deck. And I say, what's your budget? And they say, oh, I don't have one. And the second it gets to $200, they're like, yeah, that's my limit. I am going to blow my brains out. It's just right there in the store. I'm like, all right, well, that's it. You got to see this now.
Roll out the tarp.
I genuinely, I enjoy it. I enjoy the community so much that's probably what's going to keep me in it. Mm-hmm. But then alternatively, it's like, all right, I can also just run events at LGSs and still get that same community engagement. So I think there's a point where I will inevitably say, you know what, I'm done with the LGS grind.
Yeah.
Nothing personal. I can't do the LGS grind anymore, but I'll still do the TO thing. Mm-hmm. I don't know when that point is.
Okay.
And, I say this now as someone who's looking to open up a second brick and mortar location while working for a different brick and mortar company.
But is it still in the trading card space, or is it going to be more?
Still in the trading card space. Both of them are.
Wait, hold on. Games or sports?
So games specifically. Okay. Yeah. Sports is something that for me, I kind of kept that hard line boundary as if I do anything in sports, it's for me.
Okay.
That's my thing. I'm never one of the things I learned when I opened the first LGS was, as much as I may say Magic is for me, the second it becomes something I do professionally, I don't enjoy it as much. So sports is just for me. Okay. But as someone who's doing all that, I'm still man, I may be out of this. So I have no idea. Mm-hmm. But I could see myself doing it for quite a while. Okay. Unless Wizards just makes it impossible. That is the thing that I think more than anything, because I don't think I'll ever not enjoy it. I think Wizards will get it to the point, or might, and that is my fear, get it to the point where it's like, all right, well, there's just no reason to even be in this anymore.
Yeah.
And that may be the thing that pushes me out.
That makes sense. And it's weird, as you were saying that, I was thinking, like, the way my LGS is set up in their inventory, and I mentioned the Gun Plus stuff up top, and you walk up a flight of stairs to get there, and across the hall from them is the play space that they took over, so that's where the games happen. But when you walk into the main area, when you actually like walk into the store and you start looking around, if you didn't know that Warhammer was a game, it would look like a hobby shop because of the models, the gunpla, the miniatures, the puzzle. Like, as an LGS, you still have to keep some puzzles and board games on hand. That's in the back, like past the counter, and then at the counter, that's where behind that they have all the card game stuff, dice tubes, etc.
Yeah,
and it's like the idea of the LGS is so obscure, or so, that's not the right word, so like fungible, that you can do so many unique things with it as long as you pick and choose what works best for your audience. And that's why I want to make sure, like, okay, sports can be a part of it if you need it to be. Doesn't have to be. You can lean in more on things like the Gun Plus stuff, because there are Pokemon models that are made by the same companies. Like Bandai makes them,
those
right?
are insane.
Yeah. And that goes with the Warhammer stuff. They all go in the same section because they're all models. Then you could sell airbrushes if you want to as well in your LGS, because it goes with all the model stuff and the paints. Like, it's so interesting in how expansive you can be with that. The store that one of the stores we went to, they had a ton of manga in the LGS, because it's just that continuation of like, okay, we have these giant Warhammer figures. Well, sometimes there are complimentary busts that go along with the games, and when you go from that, now you can start like chaining through what else has busts that we can move into. We can go into superheroes and do comics, and so you'll see LGSs that do that as well, because the comics sub blah, 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 blah.
Star City even has that stuff on their prize wall now.
Yeah, but big tangent. All right, so for me, as it like never worked for an LGS. Not to say I do or don't want to, just never been an option. Behind the scenes of the vendor, I mentioned up top the work that I was doing. It's the same anywhere for anybody. And as long as I'm passionate about what I'm doing and that there's an impact, it's making a difference, I'm not just typing on my keyboard for 8 hours a day like a monkey, then I can continue to work there. For me, it's all about knowledge and growth. And I can do that anywhere, and it's kind of this weird split. But again, when you talk to somebody who's working in the warehouse, out back, product specialists, I'm sure there are timelines for those too, because the warehouse is very physical. You're moving all the time. Your schedule is not always friendly either, depending on what's going on. And then product specialists are super, super specialized. It's a very limited skill set, and if you want to continue to move around in the industry or move up into something else, then it's not necessarily the best idea to stick around for a while just running card prices all day long, unless you are innovating and building tools, etc., and then you can just kind of like tangent out somewhere else. So I imagine, like at the LGS, depending on what you're doing at the vendor, your time to be there in the industry could vary greatly.
Yeah, and I think one of the interesting things you touch on is when you talk about your product specialist and how that's very specialized knowledge, which may make it somewhat limited. The other thing that I think gets a lot of people out of the industry is that not only does it kind of limit the mobility you have, but it's also something you don't get paid for. Like, you don't get paid to learn that. You have to learn that on your own time. Mm-hmm. And then there comes in eventually a moment where you may be like, all right, well, I've put in the time and energy and the effort. I want to be rewarded for it. And you're capped out. You've reached your ceiling. Yeah. There's nothing else you can do without, a large financial investment that you can hand someone and be like, hey, look, I have value now. I can bring money to your company, and that's what really matters. And that's something else that I think gets a lot of people out of the industry as well, unfortunately.
No, absolutely. There's only so much room for growth across wherever you are at the LGS or the vendor level. Like the store that I was looking to open, like literally months before the shutdown, we were in the fall was when we were looking to open.
I remember that.
Summer into fall, and then that winter, because we had delays, cut it loose, and then coronavirus shut it down. Like great, right? The only reason I wouldn't have actually been working that store immediately was because we knew there was no way to pay 2 managers' salaries. And that's the important part. It's not a manager and somebody else. It's 2 managers because that is how you have to make a living as a working professional adult. You have to be at the management level for an LGS or higher. Otherwise, you're super strapped with the way things are right now.
Super paycheck to paycheck and not worth it.
Yeah, like for me to move back, out of state, back to New Jersey to work there, to live and work, wasn't gonna happen. And it's hard to hear that that's a lot of ways that people are a lot of reasons people attrition, but that's where it is. And then to get a little somber on the way out before picks, the future for the industry. Do you have any expectations?
Man, look, there's been nerds forever. It's only getting more mainstream. This industry is only going to get more lucrative. Eventually, I'll be a dinosaur and age out, and Ogre will still be around kicking because I don't think he can die.
No, as long as there is bulk to pick.
Yeah, as long as there's bulk, Ogre's here. But no, I think this industry, it will change a lot from what it is now. I don't think we'll ever go back to the way things were.
No.
Not just pre-COVID, but even outside of COVID, nerddom is so much more mainstream. It's so much more monetized. Hobbies like this are so much more incentivized. They're more talked about. People are expected to have them, all of which is good. All of which is why I think this industry continues to exist. With stuff like Critical Role and stuff like that out there, that just makes it not just actively, maybe encouraged isn't the right word, but enjoyed, encouraged. I think it sticks around forever at this point. I don't see a time when it changes. I thought for a while, as I think a lot of people did, 3D printing was going to be the death of miniatures gaming. Man, it is in such a better spot because of 3D printing. Because now literally anyone can make a miniature game, and it makes it so much easier. And that's been, seeing stuff like that happen where, this is the death knell of the industry. Oh, nope, it's the savior.
Yep.
That's huge.
Yeah. My expectation is that we just continue to move into a more digitally controlled environment whereby LGSs that want to actually turn a profit on their singles product are going to have to start integrating with e-commerce systems and not just we have our own website. No. If you plan to sell singles on-prem and on TCG Player, then you have to buy into their ecosystem so your inventory is in both places, that kind of stuff. I think the era of the open market on Facebook and on Twitter is still in its burgeoning phases. I think we're going to see a lot more of that kind of growth because it's just easier to find people who are looking for what you have to sell and vice versa. And the only thing that gives me pause is what happens with high end. At no point in time do I think anybody actually feels safe anymore with not Facebook Marketplace, but a lot of Facebook groups, because it's not rampant, but it is something to consider. That you're just, and not necessarily with whom you're working with, but issues with the post.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I agree, Facebook is in its burgeoning, nascent phase. Interestingly enough, for those of you watching, I am one of the Sick Deals admins. The group did get taken down because, according to Facebook, there was rampant fraud. Not fake cards. We were stealing money and committing money laundering. group is back now. But
and this wasn't the only one either. A lot of them went down.
There were a ton that got taken down. A bunch of them, like, we basically got a hold of Facebook engineering, appealed it, and said, "Hey guys, that's like, that ain't it. You know, that's not what happened here," and got it reinstated. That's something that is going to be a growing pain of the digital marketplace, and that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then eBay comes out and has their authentication service, and suddenly eBay's a little bit safer. You still have to trust the post office, which those guys aren't great.
Nope.
But it's still there.
Yes.
And yeah, sorry.
No.
Side note, tangent. My apologies.
That's it. Like, because that's where we are. It's just, I think like you said, everything's coming up. It's going to have its spot, and at some point in time, the big concern is really just evaluating high end from photos, which is getting easier over time, and then determining how you want to secure that high end purchase.
Yeah.
And I think that's really going to be, there might just have to be like a leap of faith taken by people to say, like, okay, it doesn't matter where we're going, we have to set aside our worry about, shipping through USPS or shipping out of the US to other countries and customs. We're going to have to get past that and what's going on. And once we figure that out, then I think we're just in a completely digital world, so to speak. We're going to see vendors at events still, but I don't think it's going to have nearly the kind of impact that operating fully in a digital space will bring.
Yeah. I think it's the one thing I think holding it back more than any other is the acquisition bottleneck.
Mm-hmm.
But there are certainly people, James Keenan being one of them, who doesn't have an issue with acquisitions digitally. Literally just, hey, I'm going to pay some people to buy for me remotely, and I'm going to advertise a buy list with generic prices, and people will send me links.
Yep.
And that's going to be basically the way it gets to. And then you'll have, I say dinosaurs, which is such a bad, like, negative connotation, but like your Card Kingdoms and your Star Cities.
Yeah.
With the traditional marketplace, it just have such a massive market share, it doesn't matter.
They're their own thing. They're going to operate the way that works best for them, and their model's not going to work for anybody else. Something like the 95 model also works too, whereby they were part of the TCG player ecosystem for forever, but if memory serves, they didn't actually have a storefront where you could buy cards for them for a while. You could only check their buy list through there.
Yep.
And that also works for acquisition, when you can just talk, you're in the TCG player ecosystem because you have to, so just put your buy list up there, and there you go. If you're selling singles and you're worried about acquisition. So that gives you a huge breadth of opportunity. And it's just, again, a NoFX song, dinosaurs will die.
Yeah.
And that's the future of the card gaming industry. Now, switch over to picks real quick. I'm going to go first because you went first last week.
That's fair.
This week, my pick is a big dumb red spell, and it is Morag, Fury of Akom. So again, just living the dream with EDH picks. And this is something I've been sitting on for a while because, as you can see on stocks, it is just rampantly flat. It peaks because it's a Minotaur, and it doesn't tank as hard as I would expect because Minotaur. And then when it finally does bottom out, it just stays there. But we haven't seen some nice growth recently, and this is why we're looking at it now, where we're trying to get ahead of a curve, basically. It's kind of started around Baldur's Gate, where we started musing about all the combats .deck, because we keep getting spells like this that give us additional combat steps, and Morag just fits right in. So on October 1st, when I started watching this, 2001, Card Kingdom was buying 0 for $0. Imagine that. There were 242 on TCG, and the market price on that was $4.27. Card Kingdom is now buying 35 at $3.25, and they are only buying 5 set foils at $3.
Interesting.
They're paying a lot better on the showcase, though. On the showcase foil, but that's not what we're here for. We're here for the set version. So the reason I like Morag in the combat deck is because of the landfall trigger that gives you an additional combat. So you look at this card, it's a legend, so you think, obviously this helms the deck. No, it does not. As Morog, it does exactly that. It goes in the combat deck, it makes the combat deck happen. But actually where this deck plays is in a Gruul-based landfall deck to give you the win. It just makes it rain combat steps inside that ramp shell. So, like I said, by virtue of its creature type, Morog slots into the Minotaur tribal deck, but it's not the most popular home for this card. Look, it is what it is. And even in the Minotaur deck, it's not actually the general. You have to play Sethron for the black. Sethron is the general of that deck because Sethron gives you access to black, which you need. I forget why, but you need it. Now, across the most popular generals, we see both extra combats and landfall as popular themes with a large number of commanders and commander pairings. So, like the partner hoo-ha. Now, this is not a subtle card, so there's not a lot of hidden information to attempt to divine when you read Morog. It does what it does, and that's all it does. So instead, what we care about is popularity and utilization in the format. And when we look at Morog as a card on EDHREC, this is in 27,000 decks of a possible 584,000, roughly 5%, which is, I think, amazing for this card, right? That is a ton. We talked about percentages like this last week with green cards. So continued adoption is also important to the viability of the card long term, and we are seeing this as well. Not every red plus X commander can take advantage of Morog, but there seems to be at least one new commander every other set that can make use of at least the landfall trigger. So there are great markers for Morog, pointing to a long life within the format. Now, we are towards the end of Double Masters 2 spoilers, and I just had to jot this down because it was spoiled, I think, today. A card called Warrior's Oath from Portal 3 Kingdoms is getting reprinted in Double Masters 2. And it is basically Final Fortune. It is another combat step. So it is yet another card that gives you an additional combat step. So this is exactly what I just talked about. We keep getting stuff that works with this card, and here we are with a brand new reprint in this set after Baldur's Gate, where I believe we just got another card or general that works with this, or an additional bump to the theme. This card just keeps getting more reasons to be useful. Like, they just keep making it better. So I think the timeline on this is going to be a longer hold. We're probably looking at close to a year to get out, as the price has been stable for a rather long time. All the while, it does sell well. It has been selling well. So this solid price across the open and closed market leads me to believe that we won't see too much movement until this has been removed almost entirely from the marketplace. Now, the driver behind my thought on the timeline is that in the last 3 months, several hundred copies have been sold, like over 600, yet the number of unique prices is holding steady. So this seems like individuals who are just continuing to dig out their copies, but the well will run dry. We're not too far away from Zendikar Rising, so it just seems like people are just looking through their binders, like pulling old cards, be like, oh, I've got a Morog, let me toss it up on TCG. So unique prices are not dropping, but overall population is, and that's why I think it's going to take so long. That was all written before Warrior's Oath was spoiled. I don't know if that's really going to push it, but I don't see a way that we don't get some kind of commander content with Warrior's Oath now if somebody does a series of videos around that set, like Star City or Goldfish or Game Nights. If any one of them focuses on taking turns again, then we should see Morog again, and that should push it a little bit, but I still think we're a while out. Reprint equity, I think, is really, really low because this is a named card from a specific plane that we just revisited, and I don't think there's any way this is in anything more than a commander deck that is dedicated to landfall, which might not even happen because I don't think they like using that as a commander product push. It just doesn't seem like the right option. It's kind of parasitic gameplay because it's a core mechanic to the game. It's like triggering off of every draw step. Like, cool move, bud. So, by quantity, I don't own any set versions of this card. Straight up. I picked up non-foil showcase for EDH play when
Sure.
when I started looking at this card, because I'm a DGen and play 4-color Omnath.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll take infinite combats. That's cool with me.
Yep.
And when I move in on set versions, I'm more than happy to pick up at least 2 play sets of this card. I don't know how well it's going to trade out locally, and your mileage may vary on that, but I do think this is going to have high appeal again for local commander players. At the start, it was, hey, Minotaurs. Now we're looking at
Minotaur.
Yeah, now we're looking at like, hey, combat steps. Let's end the game. And I think we're going to cycle around to a point where this is going to be a lot more popular again. So first, I would try outing locally, and then buy a list.
I think that's smart. I think the best part about this, like you said, is they keep making things that make it relevant. And I think the thing that really helps it is it's 2 mechanics or 2 themes that it works well with that they continually revisit. Lands Matter has been one of the most perpetually prominent themes in Magic since literally Landfall became a thing. Wizards loves making Lands Matter stuff. That's fine. Combat is something that Wizards has made it abundantly clear they want to be an important part of the game. That's why you're getting spells stapled onto 2/1 bodies with flash that give things flashback and stuff like that. So I think this is an incredibly solid pick. And I'm actually a little surprised that it hasn't spiked yet more than it, to a higher price point. But
yeah, I think it's really because of what I mentioned, where it's like, if this sold 600 plus copies in like 3-ish months, but the number of unique prices did not budge. Like it stayed the same. It stayed flat this entire time. Like I mentioned, there are 242 prices in October, unique prices. If I filter for LP and NM, there's 238 unique prices. There are 4 less unique prices since October, and it's sold over 600 copies in the last 3 months. It's just this weird, like, data point that I can't quite explain, but I'm holding on to as the reason for why it has not taken off yet. It's just kind of cloudy, and I also, no commander content on it. I'm sure Game Nights did a Minotaur thing, and I thought I heard them do a combat thing, which might have pushed like Combat Celebrant and some of that stuff, but I don't know if Morog was featured in that. So
that's fair. I am also going with a Big Dumb Commander card. Not only am I going with a Big Dumb Commander card, I am going with the best Big Dumb Commander card in either Commander Legends 2 Electric Boogaloo or in Double Masters. Jeweled Lotus. It's the best card in those sets because it's not in either of those sets. This was outside of Fetchlands and Dockside. I think the card that most needed a reprint for the financial accessibility of the format in which it is highlighted. Obviously, EDH. It is a little bit pricey. Obviously, at around, low is sitting at around $85, $90. Generally, it's going to be around 100 at most booths, most stores probably. That's fine. This card not getting a major reprint.
Sadly, no.
And what I expect now, honestly, is a list printing more than anything else. But as we have seen from the list, it doesn't really do a whole lot. It's fine, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't really help the financial value of the card. So honestly, what I've been doing since basically it wasn't printed in Commander Legends 2, I bought one for each of my decks, which is 3. And for each of those, I bought 1 extra copy. And the reason being, I am fully confident that within 6 to 9 months, we'll be able to see a double up on this card, and I'll be able to have free Jeweled Lotuses. Now, looking at the stocks graph, obviously it's been a pretty steady timeline. I think a lot of that was because people fully expected, rightfully so, a reprint. We didn't get it. And because we didn't get it, I am saying that this is one of those emergency buy now situations. I wouldn't go deeper than probably 3 or 4. One, because of the high price point barrier of entry, and two, it's an EDH card. I don't need 4 of them to play in a deck. I probably only need it in 2 or 3 decks, even if I have like 6 or 7 of them. Because really, I only want it for like 1 to 2 color decks, maybe 3 color, but probably not. I think probably going to be your best bet is pick it up at local stores, pick it up in trade binders, or pick it up on Facebook. I think you'll get a lot of people that if you were to trade, people that have extras, I have found, have been very willing to trade out of it because of high value it is, especially if you have like a high-end foil, like an expedition or something like that they can trade it into. The other thing is the liquidity of this card is absolutely insane. I cannot remember putting this in a booth, having it in my trade binder for more than, at a booth, 2 hours, literally after I bought it. And trade binder, the next time I go out and take my trade binder out, it's gone. I think it's just an incredibly good opportunity, and reprint equity is pretty low.
Yeah.
Like I said, just the list. I cannot imagine them doing a secret lair of a card like this. It's the same as them doing a secret lair of Mana Crypt, which is a very good analog price-wise, because Mana Crypt has been printed a number of times and still holds a $150 price tag. So even if we do get this card reprinted in some way, I think at this point $100 is just the floor for this card. I don't think it's going below that ever.
It looks like
I just think it's an incredibly good time to get it. I think visibility wise, I don't know when it gets more from here on out, it's only going up. There is no point from here on which it will be more affordable than it is now.
It's like 260-ish sold since May 31st-ish on TCG Player. Right, so that's like 10 a day. I think there's a lot of trepidation on buying this when we're heading into 2x2 spoilers, because what if it's reprinted? Why would I spend $90-some? And I think there's going to be that big call, like you said, coming up shortly, where this card's just gonna fucking rocket. And as you were talking about this, I was sitting here with my hand on my head, and I was just thinking something we were talking before the cast, and I just had this thought bouncing around, you don't reprint this card, but you reprint Dockside, and you reprint Vault, and you reprint Mono Drain, and you reprint Teferi's Protection, and you reprint Smothering Tide. How aggressive is Commander supposed to be anymore? What is this format becoming? But you don't print Jeweled Lotus. It was is Jeweled Lotus the card that pushes it over, or is putting too many of those cards in that set making Commander too aggressive by making these cards so immediately accessible? And when I mean aggressive, I say what's your deck out of 10, right? It's you start with a Jeweled Lotus and a Dockside and a Smothering Tithe, and it's well, now you have a deck that a lot of people complain about on Twitter as being too powerful. Like you say, it's a 7, but you're closer to a 9. And there just seems to be nothing in the social contract about any of these cards. So it's not like that's holding people back from buying this.
No.
It was, like you pointed out, I think, price point for a while. Fear of a reprint because you're investing a lot into a card that people thought would not hold this value for this long.
Absolutely. I absolutely, I fully expected we're getting a reprint in one of these 2 sets. This is where it's going to happen. It has to happen. And I think, philosophically, my belief was it has to happen because if Commander is your flagship format, which it is, Wizards may not openly admit it. I'm pretty sure they have at some point, but let's be real. That's what's driving the game. That's where people are coming into it. That's where your players are, is in EDH. And same argument for fetches in Modern. If you want the format to be accessible, if you want people to be able to get into it and play it, it needs to have an affordable price point. And there are now people complaining about Modern not being an affordable format. There's always been people complaining that EDH is literally just who has a bigger wallet, the format. I fully expected this to get a reprint for that reason, because look, marquee year. This is, 30 years. We have these great sets that are just going to blow the water out of the game. Granted, one of them was one of the biggest flops I can remember since Chronicles and Commander Legends 2. But you're tying in your IPs, you're expanding into Lord of the Rings, into Warhammer. There's all these cool things going on. Let's make our marquee formats accessible. And then they didn't do it. And to me, that's like pretty big signal that, like, hey guys, probably time to buy these cards.
Yep.
Because they're never going to be more affordable than this.
Yes, I'm looking at the sets that we know of, and there's no place that makes sense because it's 2 standard sets and a jumpstart. Like, It's not coming in Infinity, that's for sure.
No, and we're not even getting fetches. We're just getting Shocklands.
As far as we know, those could be in a standard set, which is TBD.
Oh, Mero said never again in standards. So.
Well, good thing. What is it? One of these Lord of the Rings sets just drops right into Modern or something.
Yeah, exactly. Here's hoping we can get a Scalding Tarn. I bet it's the volcano where they drop the ring in. Called shot. It's not happening.
No, is it? I'm sorry. I'm trying to figure out draft, non-canon. I imagine that. Other Horizons. Whatever. Okay, I don't care anymore. I don't believe this is a standard set, the Lord of the Rings. But I think it just goes straight to Modern. It has to. Yeah, it's out of sequence.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. There's no argument against Jeweled Lotus. I don't think you can make one because there's no point in time where this gets a reprint. It's like, what are they going to do? Put it in a monocolored commander decks as the commander? Like,
right.
Partner with Jeweled Lotus. Cool. No, sorry. Jeweled Lotus is your background because you're monocolor. That's what happens. It's weird to think that this is never a card that's been on my radar as a pick, but it's not one I have a lot of hands-on experience with. My play group, nobody has them. Nobody really opened CL. So this just slipped right past. The only hubbub was today when Lash Scythe or whatever crunched out Jeweled Lotus, and here we are.
Yeah, Lotus Petal and everything else. And it's like, all right, well, I guess to the moon.
Yep. I think it's solid. This is probably, for anybody that can afford that buy-in, it's definitely a really good look. So
yeah. Definitely.
I think that's going to be it for this episode, right? Nothing else?
Indeed. Right. Nothing else.
So we are at MtG Cabal Cast on Twitter, Patreon, Facebook, YouTube, and anywhere you can listen to a podcast. If you want to reach us directly instead of through the podcast Twitter, you can reach me at Halt I Am Reptar. You are
at Thirsty Sizzler.
We'll see you next week.